Good evening and welcome. I'm John Lazarus with Stories Matter and D&E Publishing. Fear, as they say, is the great motivator. We work hard because we fear that, without enough money, we'll live in places where strangers have easy access to our bodies as we sleep. We stuff our face with Oreos because deep down, we fear that without adequate fat reserves, we won't survive an extended period of poor harvest. We work out, wear nice clothes, and try to act charming because we fear that, with nobody in our lives, we'll suffer a brain aneurysm at home and there'll be nobody to ensure we receive urgent medical care. All these things, while not great for the human mental well-being, are great for horror writers who can draw liberally from this wellspring of human misery. In today's video, we'll explore how to write effective horror, but first, a word from our sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by the World Clown Association. The WCA is committed to bringing joy, happiness, and exaggerated facial features that obscure normal human emotional signals to people around the world. The WCA has a wide variety of clowns to dispatch according to your needs. Putting on a bat mitzvah for a deaf child soon-to-be man? Our non-vocal clowns communicate comedy solely through exaggerated gestures and extreme facial distortions. Is your son or daughter all alone in the children's ward of your rundown hospital with no video game room? Our clowns are on call 24/7 and will be willing to provide fun entertainment even in the dead of night. Visit the WCA website today to learn more. And as part of my agreement with the WCA, I will be flashing quick shots of clown faces sporadically throughout today's video. First, let's examine what makes a successful horror story. And we'll do this by looking at three very different horror stories that share a similar element we often find in horror: women. The three stories are We Have Always Lived in the Castle, Carrie, and A Good Man is Hard to Find. Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle is a gothic novel about two sisters whose parents were mysteriously poisoned to death years ago. The novel focuses on instinctive fears, asking the question many of us asked ourselves when we were children. If we murder our parents, who will make us breakfast? Besides instinctive fears, we also have external fear. In stories like Carrie, it's what's around us that scares us. For most readers, the relatable nightmare is bullying, social pressure, and spousal abuse. But for cool people like me, the nightmare is the people who you bullied in high school learning to fight back, or shame you on social media. Flannery O'Connor's short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find, is more of an existential horror, a story where you are doomed by a cruel fate that fucked you from the start. In this story, a family is doomed to death because of their grandmother's poor directions. Anyone who's ever spent time in a car or on the road with anyone over 80 can probably relate. So let's see how we can make our stories shine their brightest, or whatever the opposite of that would be in this case, I guess. Step 1. Borrow from your own experiences and the local news. If you're anything like me, doctor's visits have probably turned up lumps, boils, cysts, and teratomas that could rival any of the horrors from the fiction of Lovecraft or King. Simply put, real life can be pretty damn terrifying. But if you're a shut-in with OCD and a home gym who also thinks there's too much liberal bias in the news, and YouTube analytics tell me that's likely, you might feel lacking in inspiration. There are some shortcuts you can take. While most obituaries don't list the cause of death, or at least don't go into detail, coroner's reports will. A $10 tip to a night shift nurse could lead to a $1,000 idea. But you'd also be surprised at how much trauma you have in your own family and friend circle. I believe they say that nobody in America has more than 3 degrees of separation between them and a serial killer. It might just be Wisconsin, I'm not sure. Anyway, I think you'd be surprised how many of them were nearly killed by or killed their neighbors for basically no reason. Step 2. Make us care. Nobody gives a shit if a CEO, an influencer, or a dog dies. There's plenty where that came from. There's no stakes in those types of stories. You have to provide the reader with an emotional core to wrap the story around. You could make your character be attacked by ghouls on the way to an important job interview, for example. Or have your haunting take place inside a brothel, in which your protagonist really needs to let off some steam. And who's more relatable than maverick politicians? In my 2003 novel, The Bridge to the Apocalypse, Senator Larry Starr races to convince the country to put up a wall between the US and Mexico to prevent a zombie horde from infecting the US. Step 3. Use a plot twist. Normally, I'm against plot twists. I think they're cheap and unnecessary. I mean, if at the end of this video I told you I'm not actually a successful writer, but instead a psycho who pretends to be one, you'd feel cheated, wouldn't you? But horror readers aren't like most other readers. Most readers read so other people will think they're smart and sophisticated. Horror readers, on the other hand, read for titillation because they grew up in households with strict rules against pornography. The biggest trouble is making sure nobody can guess it too early. In my 2019 novel, Dawson, everyone guessed Dawson was the killer too early because I'd made him a raving misogynist who owned a knife shop, and his only alibi was that he forgot. Step 4. Make your characters lose control. Horror is all about losing control. Nobody gets scared when they see police, for example, because they know police are a force for good, that they can keep bad guys at bay, and that they maintain peace and handle all problems in a calm, fair, and subdued manner. But in a horror story, you've got to cut off your protagonist from all kinds of support. Cell phones have to die, inclement weather has to strand, and butlers have to call in sick. Well, that's all for today. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll leave you with this week's This Day in Literary History. See you on the next one.